So once you've set up your files correctly, used the meta tag for viewport, once you've turned off the box model, set your base font in the HTML using REMs and percentages, you'll see that if you set up your files correctly, there is a bit of responsive already built in, right? You'll notice that everything is shrinking and growing where it needs to be. But there's also some points at which things just start not looking good, right? We start getting to this, and if you've got a lot of text, that's a little bit hard to read. So we need to come up with another way of rewriting some of our CSS at certain points. In other words, at certain times, at certain widths of screens, we're going to want to rewrite bits of our CSS so that we can change things like widths or colors or whatever we want to change. The first thing we have to do for coding a responsive website is we need to figure out what's called our breakpoints. Now, a breakpoint is exactly what it sounds like. It is the point at which your site breaks. And that's not to say that your site literally breaks. It's just to say that it comes a certain point where even if it's not necessarily broken, design-wise, it may not look good. I feel that this might be a little too much text at a certain size. At another size, it's definitely too much text. These boxes get a little small. If they have a lot of text, we might have a problem. Some things look good. Now, there's a couple of ways to figure out a breakpoint. There is no standard use list. Best practice, everybody use this. Some breakpoint sizes that I use, 960 pixels, 768, 480, and occasionally 320. You may not want to use all those breakpoints. You may not need them. You may only use one or two. So how do we figure out the breakpoints? Pretty simple. I'm going to use Chrome. For me, Chrome is the best one. I like their emulators. I'm going to come right over in here. I'm going to go to Inspect. Now, as you shrink and grow the window, you'll notice in the top right corner, right up here, is a series of numbers. The fixed one is obviously the height. The height of this screen, what you can see is 915 pixels. But the width is changing based on how I shrink it or grow it. And that's one way you can look at things. But I also want to show you another way, a really important way. So quick and dirty, this is absolutely what I do. I shrink and grow the window. I look at it, I find a breakpoint that's close. In this case, let me see, 960 is one of the first ones. I might say at 960, I want to do a break. I might want to make a breakpoint, at least for these, if not anything else. But let's look at something else. I know that an iPhone is roughly 360, 375. Let's see how everything looks. This is not great, but I want to actually see what it looks like in an iPhone. And that's where an emulator comes in. An emulator is something that mimics something else. In this case, we're going to mimic what a screen device looks like. Google Inspect has this built in. This little device is called the Toggle Device Toolbar. With this, if I click this, now I can actually see what everything looks like on an iPhone 6 or on an iPhone X. And you'll also see numbers up here. These are the widths. Helps you figure out breakpoints. iPad Pro, 1024. That actually looks okay to me, and I can zoom in to 100%. Let's see, iPad. iPad is 768, which my 960 will cover, and I know I don't like this. So using a combination of shrinking and growing the window and looking at these devices. I'm going to go ahead and keep this on iPad. Actually, I'm going to turn this off. And let's go over here and work on our first media query. Media queries always go at the bottom of your CSS. They must be the last thing in your CSS. Remember, CSS reads top to bottom. Anything at the bottom overrides anything at the top. What we're using our media queries for is to override certain styles for certain classes or IDs or tags that we've already established. Or we're making new ones. But in order to override a width that we've set up in our CSS, remember it needs to be at the bottom. One other thing I want to talk about real quick is how I'm doing this website. I'm doing what's called desktop first. What that means is I build out my desktop version and then I slowly scale down in different sizes and do my responsive that way. You will hear about mobile first, and in other classes you may be asked to do that. Mobile first means you're going to start building at the smallest screen size and work your way up. For this tutorial, I am working desktop first. First thing I'm going to do is at media. This line says, look, I need you to go look at the media, and I need you to figure out certain elements. In this case, we're going to say screen. So I want the media to figure out what is the screen width, and we're also going to say, with parentheses, max width 960 pixels. So what that's saying is, look, if the screen has a maximum width of 960, so if it's no bigger than 960, anything less than 960 should behave a certain way. So I'm going to do my open curly cues, and then I'm going to figure out which piece I want to change. Now, I only want to change the width on the box quarter. Everything else is going to stay the same. And since that's all I have here, I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste that right here. Let me fix my tabs. And I'm going to say, okay, instead of 25%, I want them to be 50%. So in other words, any device that's lower than 960 pixels, they should be 50% rather than 25% width. Everything above 960, so 961 and above, they should be exactly what you're seeing here. Now you'll notice there's no change, but watch what happens when I shrink the window. At a certain point, they now become 4 boxes. And let's say that at this point, there's a little bit of a problem. There's a little bit, it's sticking together. So one thing I want to add here is I want to add a margin bottom. I'm going to say 1.5 rem. I'm going to save that, and then look. Now I've got 2 separate rows. So let me close this out, and you can see what I'm talking about. Now see, this screen right now is not 960. But as I shrink it down and I get to 960, this is what's going to happen. Above 960, below 960. And then we can test this. So you'll see, iPad Pro, 1024, everything looks great. iPad, which is below 960, everything doesn't, right? You can see that we've changed this. You can see that what we've fixed is showing up. It looks different. You can do this. Now I can go through here and I can say, okay, this looks great. Changing the size of boxes is not the only thing we can do. We can also change, well, anything we want to do. Like for example, let's look at this background right down here. This background, I'm going to scroll down and look at where I've got this. I've got this row with the name background as a class. So here's all my settings for background. Now let's say I want to keep the no repeat, I want to keep the background size, I want to keep the target aligned, but I want to change the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this, I'm going to copy this, and let's say at another media query, I'm going to do at media screen, and let's say our max width is 480. And then I'm going to open this up and I'm going to put this right here. And instead of this, I want to change it to this. Now, again, no difference here, none. But as I shrink the window, you will notice at a certain point that changes. Again, let's look at it on the bigger view. Scroll down here. Let's do inspect. Change the emulator. to, let's say, iPhone 5. And there you go. The background's changed. I have a lot of other work to do to make this work. So for example, maybe I also need to change the font color. There we go. I must have a height on something because it's not scaling. So again, I'm not going to go through all of this right now, but you can see that you can make a lot of changes, right? You need to fix these. All of these at a certain breakpoint, maybe these need to all be 100%. I can come down here. I can also say, I've got all of these boxes. Let's come up here. I'm going to take all of these right here, like this. I'm going to do this quick and dirty. I'm going to come down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them all into one because I want them to all have the same thing. And then I'm going to change the width to 100%. Now if you come over here, all of our boxes are now 100%. And they fit, except for this one. But we'll figure that out later. So media queries are crucial when it comes to building your website and making it responsive. Along with everything else we've covered, right? You want to do the media queries.